And just give you just quick overview of the Mexican market. We've talked about it in the last two sessions. But again, it's just to give you an overview on how things are in Mexico and how we can do a marketing support or promotional support for the activities that could be through the to the Fund Match program or through the activities, the Global Connect activities that USARA does. Um, Now, first off, is how is the market? And again, we've covered it differently. We've talked about it, and probably I'll repeat myself, but basically, there are factors that Mexicans take to buy and take, and drive product. Basically, is the quality, but the quality is close to the price or the value, and this it's very different because at some point, and you've heard that in some of the briefings, that price is very important for Mexicans. Well, it is, but also we have talked that there is a market for high-end products. There's a good consumption base in Mexico that is not the overall, it's not the bulk of the population, but we still have a 30-40 million people that are able to have to buy to purchase product and have a discretionary expense, especially in food and beverage. So the quality is key here, but again, if you see, price is also very important, and value. And value is I'm receiving what I'm paying for. If I'm paying more, then I'm getting that value. But again, the product quality is there, and it has to make sense because here we may have a comparison that the value of the product itself can be high, but if you put it comparatively to what is in the market, its value may reduce because it's too expensive, or I'm not getting that much of that product compared to what I see in the market. And again, we've seen some examples of that, and some of you actually have seen that. If that is the case, then we need to work on promoting that value and and sorry, transmitting that, communicating that to the consumer, so they know the value and they can actually pay for that. But again, it's not lack of money; it's lack of understanding. And again, knowing that Mexicans don't shop as a hobby; they shop as a habit. So if they compare prices, and again, somebody's out in the, thank you. So promotions, again, the promotions help you with that, so you can communicate that value to the consumers. Now, there is another thing that is called, is the product availability. Uh, and we've seen that at some point that we make promotions, but the product is not there. Uh, People are engaged, buyers like it, but there it's just not there. So you need to work on that. So the product reaches the consumer at the time that you're making the promotion. Otherwise, you're losing your money. There is a point if you see that the origin is lower, but it's number 5 in general, and where the product comes from. And that's a question that I've had from many exporters. We're from the US. Well, that's important for Americans. It's important for people that have traveled, but the value of the country is, the national product is not as relevant as the others. If I don't see value, if I don't see promotion, and if it's not good quality, it doesn't matter where it comes from. We have seen very bad cheeses from France or very cheap Spanish wine. So again, it really does, it's not that relevant, even though for an exports market, it could be important to the exporter, but not so for the importer. So just be aware of that. And also the performance in other countries is not that relevant because again, if the product works beautifully in China or Korea or Europe or Southeast Asia, that's great. But that's another market, that's another culture. It's thousands of miles from Mexico, and they haven't had the market development that we have had in Mexico, and that applies too for Latin America. I will be talking about South America in the next weeks, and even though there are similarities, there are different countries and different markets, and they have different dynamics. So that has to be very, taken into account. And finally, we take, the product brands. Certifications and claims, unfortunately, are not relevant in the market, and we had an organic delegation last week, and that was one of the big issues that people don't understand what they mean. You know, a seal or a certification, again, could be a selling point only if you can translate it into value for the consumer. And finally, in the lower end, social responsibility, which I know is very important in the US, but here, not that much. You know, if it's minority owned, is it women owned? It again, it gives you a good point, but to the mass consumer is not that relevant as it may be in other markets. So again, you know, probably it's harsh, but that's what you see. And this is actually a retail store that we visited last week. So this is very recent, and you can see that these places are there, and you can see, you know, the pre-packed lettuce is twice as much twice as much as the regular lettuce, you know, that is in some other aisle. So again, we can buy good quality, good product, and it has to be, you know, you have to have promotions. So again, food for thought, and I hope we can discuss that later on the conversation. Now, how are demographics in Mexico? And we didn't cover this. This is information from the general, you know, from the government. And if you see this pile or this figure, I don't know how to call it. It looks like a tree. But you can see from the bottom to top is the age of the population. So you have the youngest population in the bottom, and then it goes, you know, increasing as they get older. So you still see that the bulk of our population is below 40. So we're still a young country. You know, we're talking about 126, 130 million people. So if you see that, and again, we've been talking about demographics. Yes, it's 130 million people, but then you see that demographics are different. So you only, let's say about 60% of the population is below 40. That could be, you know, the consumer base. And obviously you have a younger population that are still not able to purchase. So again, the segment, you know, they start to compress, and you see that you need to have specific activities for the specific markets. However, the median age of Mexico has increased. In 2000, it was 22 years old. So we were a very, very young country. Lots of kids, younger marriages, and you can see now how it's increased to 29. So it's following global trends, you know, younger people, the millennials, and I don't know what they're called these days, but the younger generations are not having as much kids. You know, they're going more for the enjoyment of the moment than long-term planning, but their discretionary expense is increasing as well. So again, it's increasing, but if you compare it to other countries like, you know, in Europe or Asia, we're still a very young country. Now, there are some entities that are more and less populated. You know, we're missing an S there, but you see that also, and we've talked about it in the last seminar, that we are a centralized market where Mexico City has 16 million, which is 10% of the overall population. Sorry, Estado de Mexico, which is the metro area of Mexico City, that combined to the second one, that is the actual Mexico City, you have a 25 million people market, which is one fifth of it all. So again, it's a centralized market. And the ones that have come to Mexico to our trade missions, you can see why we focus on Mexico City, not so in the other entities. We've done missions to Guadalajara, which is number 3, but Guadalajara has a good consumption base, but not a good trade base. You don't have many importers in that city. Or Veracruz, where you have, again, a large population, but they're more in, I would say, you know, day-to-day operations, and they're more consumers than traders. You have more industry, you have more, again, the ports are there, some of the oil-based cities are there, but there is not so much trade. So that's why we keep going to Mexico City. We do Monterrey because they have a good trade base, and also Guadalajara. But Guadalajara, we do it every now and then because, again, it's not as big as the others. They have more regional trade. But basically, again, trying to explain why we keep going to specific demographics. But anyway, now, one thing that is important to mention is that the digital access has changed the trade, and that's something interesting with pandemic too, because you see how in 2015 we had only 62 million internet users, and now we have 84. So we have from 60% of the population using internet 10 years ago, now 72% of them have access to digital media. And that's very important because also the trade and the promotional activities have shifted, where instead of just having demos and having in-store promotions, we are moving towards retail marketing, social media, websites. And again, it changed dramatically during the pandemic because before pandemic, only 3% of overall trade was e-commerce. Now we moved to 12%. So it quadrupled in 5 years. And again, we need to catch up if we want to, be in the trend, or we want our consumers to see the products that we're selling. Cell phones distribution hasn't changed a lot, but 75% of Mexicans have a phone in general. And here in the bottom right, bottom left, you see who is using internet, and you see that from teenage years, from 12 to 17, which is the second block, through 35 to 44, more than 80% of that population actually use internet on daily basis. So some of them are the teenagers, again, probably not consumers per se, but they can influence the consumers, the parents or the ones actually doing the purchase. Then you move to 18 to 24 and 25 to 34, which is the consumer base, actually the ones trying new products or following the trends. And then it slowly reduces. Now, what do they use their phones for? Well, 90% use it for instant messaging. As you know, WhatsApp in Mexico is prevalent. We don't have WeChat or other systems used in Asia. We use WhatsApp most of the times. Social media, 78%. Contents in audio and video, 77%. TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and actually they're becoming Instagram, and also they're becoming a more a more used tool. You see influencers and consumption channels that are growing rapidly and have done it in the last 3 years. So that's a good point for distribution and for promotion. And also Waze and Google Maps, 42%. You can see the big difference between the first three and the rest. They do games, they do edit photos and videos, but basically, and you can see in the lower tier, to acquire goods and services, only 30%. So the Mexicans don't buy on their phones, but they use a phone so they can buy things. We still see a lot of traffic going to the stores. There are digital apps that are working, but they're not the mainstream of the market. We use the phone so we can check what people is saying about the product, if there's anything about the product, and then we go to the store and buy it. And sometimes, and I've seen myself doing that, I check a new product and I go to the website, or I see if there's any review for that on the internet. Now, one thing I think basically how trade is moving, you see in the lower chart, the lower pie, 35% was spent in 2016 for food, beverages, and tobacco. Now we moved up to 37, almost 38%. So that's a big increase. Mexicans are buying more in food, beverages, and tobacco, the hedonistic part of things, eating, feeling through their senses. And also that has to do with the increased inconvenience and trade and new products. So when I say that this market is evolving, it is. You can see the numbers here. We're spending more in food, beverages, and tobacco. And interestingly, we're spending less in education and recreation. And I had a discussion with somebody in the cinema industry recently, and they're struggling because people are not going to the movies, as they did. He thinks that is all, one is that because of the writers strike and the actors strike that happened a couple of years ago, the pipeline of content actually got stopped. So they expect to recover and probably bounce back. But the other is that people are actually looking more into their phones than going outside to a cinema or going out to, for entertainment. So people are going more to restaurants and less to cinemas. And that was very interesting for us. Now, how is the market in Mexico? Basically, this pie chart tells you where, how the trade is made, where consumers are buying. And you can see on the purple chart, 56% are, purchases are done in traditional means. And that means markets, mom and pop stores, again, more on the informal side. But then you can see all the rest, all the, the rest, the other 44% are supermarkets, department stores, and specialized stores. And specialized stores, I mean wine stores, wine boutiques, organic stores, things that are specific to a certain category. So you can see it's evenly spread. But again, it's a good trade in modern trade. There's a big trade there's a big traditional trade going on, and uh, basically even the people that are buying in supermarkets have some categories that are purchased or acquired in traditional, mostly in fresh products, produce, some protein, uh, um, that those more quote unquote natural products, or farm to table. But the processed foods in general are being purchased in retail stores. So again, it has evolved, and it's funny. I went to the numbers that we had from 15 years ago, and it hasn't moved much. It's interesting. I would have expected that modern trade would have evolved more, but we still have a big part in traditional trade, especially for, again, these categories like produce and protein, traditional protein. I mean, meats, some dairy, and the rest. Now, how are the prices between these two categories? And again, sorry, this is in Spanish, but basically, if you see in the chart supermarkets, that would be the basic purchase of food and beverage for a Mexican household, and you see it in pesos. So 17 items purchased in supermarket will cost you 857 pesos. The same products will cost in the traditional market 563 pesos. So you see a big difference, about 50-60% of premium from buying in traditional to buying in retail. Still, our people are buying in retail because of the convenience, because of it's nicer, et cetera, et cetera. And sorry, it was 14 goods in food and beverage. There is an impact because obviously in traditional you see more people buying with a budget. The others basically again are just going and have this more of this experiential, or type of shopping that you do. Now that's the overall market. Now what to do, and there's Patrick. What to do, and what type of events and activities you can do to promote your products. And again, probably we're sending you a lot of information, but that has to be adapted to each of your companies. Again, it takes time, and some of you are here. It takes time, and we need to find the right way and the right channel, how to access this market. First off, is trade servicing, and we talked about it last week. Yeah, last week, and basically it's understand the market and develop the relationships. They're not hard, and sometimes the relationships we need to know when to get out of them and how to uh, properly follow up until we continue. And again, I think that we have two examples in the audience. One of them is, a good importer. It had all the dots, all the checks were in that importer, but nothing happened. And then you have another case where the importer or the retailer, they just didn't reply for 6 months, and out of the blue, we got a purchase order. Again, we talked about it, persistence and patience. Inbound and outbound events are important. We need to go back to you, and we understand that you have many other things happening, and you have other clients and things to do. But we need to give you service, but also I mean, if we don't respond, just get back to us. I mean, we will not feel bad. I think we'll feel bad because we're not giving you the service, but we need to follow up jointly from what you need to offer and what we can provide to you. So again, coming in and out the market, going to trade missions, coming to the trade missions is something that is important. And again, we need to understand the market so you can test it with limited risk. So there are two options. Either you come here and you just go and find a good importer, and eventually you don't get paid, or you have patience and have that due diligence so you can start working with that importer and take more time, but basically you have your feet really standing in the ground so you don't get swept off or have problems in this market. So that's the trade shows. What trade shows? Basically, for USARA, we do ANTAD trade show, the National Retailers Association. We did 11 booths this year. We're planning to repeat next year, so that's a great show to do. And I know I have a couple here who are veterans of ANTAD. We're not doing any other trade show on the meantime, but we are doing trade missions. And as I mentioned, we have one in December that I know a couple of you are registered. Now, let's assume that you are in market or you are close to close a deal and you need to offer promotional support. First, if that is that you need to consider promotional support about 15% of the plan. I know it's a lot on the beginning, but unfortunately, it's not a variable cost. It's not as you keep going, you keep adding. At some point, you need to work with the importer or the retailer and agree on certain support, certain trade support, and it's an investment. Again, how much return you get from that investment is how much we work in the market and how strong is the plan. But the most common is to get tastings. That's what supermarkets and importers in general are still looking for. We are reducing the proportion of tastings, but they still happen. You offer free samples to consumers. Usually the samples are charged to the supplier. You need to work on the location because you don't have to do them in all the stores. You do them in the top 10% of the stores of the retailer, and you help having the experience and the likelihood of purchase, but it's an impulse purchase. Here, what we have seen is a bit expensive because a demo will be able to reach 60 to 80 consumers per day, and usually they cost about $50 per day per demo. So again, if you add that, it could be a good investment or a lengthy investment. So again, that has to be considered, and we recommend complementing it with something else on the digital side and also with a buyer. So again, around $50 per person per day. Usually it runs for 3 or 4 weeks, 2 3 days a week, and again 60 to 80 people contacted or consumers contacted on each day. I'll go quicker so we can have a discussion. Again, we have a few people, so we can do it. Now, other that can happen, discounts and special offers. They're buy one get one, a percentage of discount. Be careful with this one because, for instance, Usara does not refund you on this type of discounts. These are company funded. So if you give a discount, it's a negotiation directly between you and the buyer. But if you are in fund match, it's not, regulations don't allow you to get refunded by this type of rebates. Again, it's, the signage, coordination with the sales department, retail marketing that I'll talk a bit. So you need to advertise it either in point of sale or in retail marketing or in buying apps. But again, it attracts these price sensitive consumers so they can see the value. So one thing leads you to the other. Again, this is a promotion that was done in Costco with 20%. Now, POS is mostly used in the produce industry. It is slowly reducing in retail in general, in other categories. We still recommend that you consider it, but again, retailers are having more restrictions on using POS. They are going more to the retail marketing that I'll discuss in a bit, but this can help you more than signage. It can be more usage or recipes that you can provide, and they could be complemented with the demos. So the demos can taste the product, and they can also provide a recipe, or they can explain, or they have to explain the benefits and the value of the product. So they are combined with the others, but placing displays, posters, and banners could be difficult in some retailers. For instance, Walmart is starting to take them off, but there are some that are still accepting them. So that's why we left them in. Now, trade marketing programs, and these are negotiated with the buyer. And this is basically, what do you do to promote your product, but it's controlled by the buyer and the marketing department of the retailer, or can be negotiated through the distributor. And these trade marketing programs can include billboards that, again, are not widely used, but there are categories and there are regions that work. For instance, if you go to Tijuana, northern Mexico, where there are 105 degrees, well, it'll be hard to have somebody outside with a flag or dancing in the streets. Maybe a billboard will be more helpful because everybody will be in their cars using the AC, but they can see the signage. This can be complemented with other technologies. Waze and Google Maps actually are starting to develop programs, digital programs, so you can advertise with them. They're pricey, but they give you a lot of data. And also you can do some other things like, like exhibition contests. You can work with the people that actually work the refrigerators and provide uniforms or give a premium, a giveaway. Be very careful of not giving money or not offering money to anybody. In general, things are over the table. That is, we don't recommend ever to provide a cut or give a cut to the buyer. Don't get into that game. We see that it's decreasing in general, but we know that a couple of cases that is still happening, but we recommend you not getting there. What other activities collaborate, and this is moving more. I'll skip the prior one. I'll go to this and then come back. Then if you extend from the point of sale to the digital channels that the retailers are developing, then you can work with retail marketing. And we talked about it last week or 2 weeks ago, that Walmart was founded in 1960 something, 62, I think. Here in Mexico, it started in 94. So they have 20 years, 30 years to figure out how to get more money out of their business. And now with this, after pandemic, that's why they're not letting importers or companies to place POS, because now they figured out and they found out that they can charge for advertising in their websites, in their screens, in their hallways. And this retail marketing actually is growing. It was cheap during pandemic. Now it's becoming pricier, but these activities are coordinated with the buyer or with the marketing department to increase traffic or sales. And again, it's moving towards digital. So it's also a complement to the one that I mentioned before. So you can see here, Members Mark, which is Sam's Club, they did a promotion with a cheese, and then you can see advertising from home care products in their website, in the Walmart's website. Then you move out of the retailer, and then you can start working with social media. And here with social media is basically the channel that is dedicated to the product or the brand, is your social media. Here you can use it and you can manage it from the US, but we recommend that you target investments to increase consumers in Mexico. And that means that you will have to do the content in Mexico, in Spanish, and have it curated by Mexican living community managers. And here I want to be very respectful, especially to Mexican Americans or Mexicans living in the US. The trade has changed dramatically in 20 years. So it's very difficult to what you see in the US. The Mexican in the US is very different to the Mexican in Mexico. And I know it doesn't make sense, but the language, the idioms change, and also the consumer culture is also different. So you have to be very careful. So you use the right language, the right tone, and the right context in the Mexican market as it is now compared to what you can see from a community manager living in the States. Now, going back, then you have your social media. Facebook is Facebook is used, but also Instagram is widely used. So we recommend using either one of them. But then you can start working with chef and food bloggers, and they are influencers. But we don't recommend you going to this, huge influencers that will charge you $5,000 per post. There are micro influencers and community or let's say trade or a guild influencers that can be helpful. So, for instance, if you work with bakery, you can work with Irving, which is here, and he's the second he's the most known baker in Mexico, and he's open to do contributions and to do a recipe for one or two brands. Obviously, it's an investment, but they can boost their publication, and you can use their community to advertise your products. You need to select that. Again, it's hard to do it remotely. And at this moment, we cannot recommend a company because at some point we do it in-house, but we can guide you, we can give you recommendations in general. And unfortunately, we cannot work with the specific companies because we work with Wusara. But again, part of that Wusara's services that we provide is guiding you, and we can give you references and we can give you contacts in general so you can develop your business. Moving forward. Then other thing that you can use to get information, and as I said before, I will want to look for what you sell and try to understand more about the product. Well, basically, do an extension of your website in Spanish. You can work on geolocalization. If somebody accesses from Mexico, well, then they will direct them, to the Mexican part of it. It's not necessary that you have a very robust or a complex website. You can you can create a landing page and have other materials available. If you have been into Mexico or you did, I mean, we created content for some companies from Busara a couple of years ago. That could be included too. One or two clips could be fine. Here you can use the Spanish speaking materials that you may have in the US. Again, here we don't need to be as strict because people will use it here as reference, where in social media they will use it more to get an opinion. So here again is less strict. So you can work in this. And again, these are the tools that are internally owned, company owned, or they can be company managed. Now, there are some others that can be also included, which is trade advertising, especially for ingredients, for trying to access importers in general. It's communication more for professionals that are in your guild or in your segment or in your industry. Um, you can work on branding, but it's also good to talk about the uses of the product or the attributes of your product or your brand or your origin. And again, it's about educating the buyer. Um, because basically the magazines also use your content to create content, so they can have things to read and not only be just an advertising entity. For instance, to the right, you will see it says Vino Mexicano. What that says, just pamper that with Punto Norte. Punto Norte is a wine brand. So they're indirectly promoting the brand, but they're also talking about the industry, how the Mexican wine increased, et cetera, et cetera. And also, most of these magazines, they have online and offline formats. But again, everything is moving fast towards online. But what we have seen is that US companies and US trade associations actually are moving entirely to digital. It's like, we want to be the first ones, we want to be the early adopters, but that can hurt some of your consumers here in Mexico that are still relying on the printed media, and they still want to open a magazine and read it. So it may change in a couple of years, but that's something that you need to consider, just having both formats, online and offline, but also depends on the category. There are some that move faster than the others. And finally, for retail, consumer advertising, which is basically just, again, as it says, advertising your product. It complements social media. So here you can provide a more detailed picture or detailed information about what you sell. You can tell, here is where you tell the story. Here, for instance, we were talking about the nectarines, and this is, all the attributes, the benefits, how to open it, etc. Most magazines, as I said, there's still here it follows the same trend. We still have digital. We have digital, but there are still some with physical versions, especially on the more casual consumer media. If we talk about, the gossips, the magazines or the tabloids, that will continue with printed, but we will have more and more digital. And again, you have the the Instagram channels or those type of things. And here you can also have more resources because you can use the video advertising and uses. Here, I had a question some time ago. What happens if I have content in English? Well, you can translate and you can use big subtitles. That's something that is happening and we're seeing now, and you can see that on TikTok and uh, other channels. But yeah, you can explain the recipe, but also use big titles in Spanish so you can get information. And again, if you can help me just closing your microphones, I see I hear some background noise. Now that is in traditional market. We said that it's 40%, but also for the type of products that we have seen in the market coming from Usara, that's where most of the products go to retail. But also there are some activities that could be considered in traditional trade. Uh, it's similar to what I said, but obviously we need to consider how to get there. You can do tastings at small at stalls and markets, offer free samples. They're harder to control. You can still make them through an agency, but it's again, the cost per person per day is the same, but you need to take into account the logistics, and this is a bit more complex. You can provide also discount and special offers here with merchants. And I'm talking about produce. If we have any produce company, well, you have the importer that could be based in central market or in a terminal market that will source other smaller places or vendors. But you can, for a case of product, you can offer, a baseball cap, or you can offer a price sign, or you can offer, a set of POS so they can put into in their stall or in their little shop. POS, I talked about it, distribution, the design and price. Here, you will see more price sensitive consumers. So you need to help, to understand the price, the price structure. Here is what you see. And if you have any giveaway or promotional material, it has to be more functional. You see, like a market bag or something like that that can help them while doing their purchases. A supermarket list or a product list so they can use in their next purchase. Something that again is useful, not just the little pen or the little whatever that could be redundant as a promotional support. Now, something that I didn't talk about in retail are the cultural and themed promotions. These themed events have to do more with the seasonality, not with the cultural fairs. I mean, I'm not talking about the Day of the Dead, or which could be, probably the go-to Mexican holiday for US. Actually, I've said that before. We didn't celebrate it Day of the Dead until Coco came 5 years ago, or until the James Bond movie 10 years ago. That was, yes, we did it, but it was not as mainstream as it is now. But there are events that are happening. For instance, the spring coming in, or Mother's Day, which is May the 10th, or Father's Day, which is in June, or Children's Day, which is in April the 30th. So those holidays could be used as a promotional tool, but also the seasonality of products. For instance, we have back to school activities coming in August. Uh, the Olympics, we don't care much about Olympics, but the World Cup coming in 2 years, that's big. So that could be something that you could use, or the retailers will ask you to participate when it comes in 2 years, or the finals. Those type of things that are more cultural, but it's not. And again, I want to be respectful, but it's not cultural from the U.S. perspective. It's cultural within Mexico to Mexican consumers. So you need to understand, again, what is relevant, and not the perception that you may have being a US exporter about this market. It's trying to understand more what comes from within. And again, it helps a lot with this feel, with this emotion that comes with these holidays. And also, finally, and in traditional markets, well, working with the opinion leaders and the local leaders, there's always a leader, the biggest, the biggest booth or the oldest lady or the one that goes every week. It's funny because in Facebook we saw some, uh, how do you say it, mothers groups in Facebook, and in some cities there are 5,000 ladies just having opinions about life, kids, products, everything. So we saw a case of a company actually approaching them, the leaders, and providing them free product, and they promoted those products, and they increased their sales. So obviously, it's a very it's very specific, but that's something that helps you because basically it builds a trust, and the word of mouth recommendation is still very valid in this digital age. So again, I'm just throwing ideas, but how can we close it and how can we implement what we are saying? Well, pretty much we're, going back to our model. Again, patience, understanding the business culture, some of you have, but the most important now that we are closing this cycle of seminars is set your priorities. And we wanted to close with this so you can define the marketing support. So you can go back to the last seminar and then understand the cost structure and how much money and time you want to invest in this market, and take the decision if this market is worth it, or if from the other options that you have, that I know that you have because you're exporters, if this market is in top one, two, or three of your options. If we're four or five, we recommend that you focus on the ones that are really worth for you, and will really provide you, because again, it I've heard this, it makes sense. Yes, it makes sense to do business in Mexico, and I think this country has a lot of potential with, as things are moving forward, with global economics. But this is a market that takes a lot of time, and I've said it before, we have been doing business for 200 years, and things are changing. So unless you have this understanding and you have your strategy, we can help you to work in this relationship that takes time, and you can get the deal and you can follow up. But again, it takes time, and we're here to help. Again, as IMALINX and as Gusara Mexico, again, I want to thank you for your patience in these three seminars. But we're here to help. So we're doing trade missions, and you're please contact us. Actually, I have a couple of pending emails from some of the companies that have contacted us. I'm sorry that we cannot provide you specific information or specific lists, because we have to provide information to all. But I do recommend you that you register to our event so we can do follow-up activities and help you in these markets. So that's pretty much it. And we still have some minutes for Q&A, and I hope that we can have Q&A. So I'll just close the presentation and get back to you guys on the here. So that's my presentation.
Thank you. I don't see any comments in the chat right now, but if anyone wants to unmute themselves or write something in the chat to ask Marco a question while we have him here, this is the first time we've ever ended early, so definitely utilize the minutes that we still have with him.
Yeah, and probably I'll start using the audience, and I know I have some from Bauman, and probably I'll go back to Erica. So Erica, get ready, because probably I want to discuss how things have been with you as a marketing specialist in Idaho. So I have a question from Bauman. In USA, Wednesday and Saturdays are the big supermarkets visit same day. Same in Mexico. Wednesday, yes, because usually the supermarkets give huge discounts and exhibitions. Oh, do you see me? Yeah. Usually the supermarkets have those produce days where they provide huge discounts to in produce, trying to draw consumers. So you will see that those Wednesdays actually been having the supermarkets flooded. Saturdays, not so much. Here we have it on Sundays. Sunday is the some families in Mexico actually go to the supermarket just as their day out. It's more like a family thing, especially in the hypermarket and the large plazas. So again, Sundays are big, higher than or bigger than Saturdays. But thanks, Baman. What else? What else? What else? Oh, thank you. Thank you, Vaman. You're always nice. Always so nice. Okay. So probably I would like to, open a bit of discussions with, with Erica and ask you, Erica, what do you see? What are the main questions or hurdles that your exporters have when accessing to Mexico or trying to access to Mexico?
Well, good morning. Thank you for putting me on the spot here.
Yeah.
No, it's always a pleasure. Well, mainly it's just the unknown, of course. It's just not really knowing, and I think these seminars are fantastic tool of understanding a little bit of the market and the way of just how business are run in there. So I think just the mainly thing is, like not really knowing how things are going to work, and sometimes just assuming that things are going to be exactly run as we do it in the States. So I really appreciate you taking the time to actually explaining us, in detail. I think people are concerned about elections as well, recent
Hmm.
elections, how that it's going to turn, not just here, but also with elections in Mexico. So I know you touched a little bit on that on the previous one, but I think it's important just to know, how in the past couple of weeks, if you have seen any movement, towards investment in Mexico.
Thank you. That's a great point, Erica, and thank you for your comments. Erica Leon, she's in Idaho. She's a marketing specialist there, and she runs many programs into Mexico. So she's a very good contact, and she coordinates some of the missions that come here, and also hosts inbound missions going there to Idaho. But she coordinates other events on behalf of Idaho for USARA. But yeah, that's a very good point. And actually, I'm going to follow up with Patrick that also talked, and he's asking that, curious about the recent presidential election results in Mexico and thoughts on the impacts on the business environment. We covered it last week, but obviously, we may not have the same audience. As you know, we had the ruling party winning. It was landslide, 70%, 65%, I think, of voters. Uh, it was a clear election. Fortunately, we didn't have a fraud, um, let's say, opinion about it. It was a very smooth process. It was surprising, even for the ruling party, that they had so much acceptance. As you know, the ruling party right now, the administration is, in concept, is left. In reality, is center left. And there was a lot of discussion and there was a lot of fear about changing the constitution on the judicial power. Basically, they wanted or they are proposing that the Supreme Court is elected, which is very hard. But obviously, they will push for that. And right now, I think is more steering the waters so they can get some compromise from the from the other from the different powers and different institutions. Now, going back to the question, we're stable. It was a couple of weeks. Basically, was the shock. I mean, it was expected. We didn't expect it to be that that clear. The ruling this administration has not been particularly pro-business, but they have on the other side. Again, it's one thing the speech and the other is the reality. We have been doing well in general as businesses. The market is growing. We have stability. We think that there will be more money going. More programs for let's say vulnerable communities, which obviously increases expenditure. The government expenditure, but 2 weeks out, I can tell you that things are normal. Basically, it's just that anticipation on how those political changes may go. But as somebody from the U.S. Embassy told me years ago, policy in general don't change. We don't see anything happening between the two countries. Trade has not changed. We had a slight increase in the exchange rate one day after the election. And my personal opinion is that it was, they were controlling the exchange rate before the election, and they just released it to the normal fluctuations right after it. Right now, I think it's in 1840. We were down to 1680. I mean, 16 pesos and 80 cents per dollar. Now we're $18, 18 pesos and 60 cents per dollar. So that could affect a bit on the value of the imports, but that's something that we were expecting too. We were expecting that to be adjusted from March, and for some reason it didn't change. So going back to the question, business as usual. We had a trade mission last week, business as usual, and the incoming Secretary of Agriculture is he's graduate from Phoenix. He was a teacher in UC, has been in international parties and committees. So we don't expect many changes. Obviously, the speech is about uh, agricultural sovereignty. I don't know if that's a word, but we know that there's international trade involved. So basically, they want to be more self-sufficient in corn, which is impossible because of our consumption, and they want to avoid GMOs on yellow corn for feed. So again, I could tell you, not it's nothing that really take a lot of attention to us more than what is in the news. And basically, we're expecting now your election, which will be interesting in November. Now, thank you for the presentation from Daniel about the cultural differences between Mexican Americans and Americans living in Mexico. As somebody who is Latino living in Canada, you would learn to love a bit more of that difference. Okay, please, I do this without most respect, but there are differences between Mexican Americans and people living in Mexico in the US for more than 20 years than people living in Mexico on regular basis. And that is because uh, there is a lot of nostalgia, and there are things that are the same, again, in language, in idioms, and in customs uh, in the US than what we have in Mexico. Again, this is an evolving culture just as the US. So I would put it just as if you went to, from Mexico to wherever 30 years ago and you didn't have any context. Well, you will continue thinking and saying the same things. Whereas if you're here, you're more sensitive to the changes, and you see how it has evolved. So there are things, especially with the language, that's very common, that you see something very very simple. In Mexico, we see eh. If you don't hear eh, in the US you say oh, and you can hear somebody that has lived in the States, you can identify them on the spot. So there are things that also change, and for instance, truck in Mexico City is camión. If somebody is, has been in probably in some of the growing regions in the States, they say troca or truck. It's very difficult. I don't know, probably Erika, if you have anything else to complement. I mean, you've been you're recently in the States, but I don't know. We see that, especially with second generation. We see that there are some slight changes. So just make sure that you fine tune the communication that you have being outside to the one that you can have here. Not sure if anybody has anything to add to that.